All right, we are live. It is 2015. Happy New Year, everybody. It is January 1st. This is our first Backdrop CMS weekly progress meeting of 2015. And we are imminently close to release of Backdrop 1.0.0, which makes everything super exciting. So today we're just going to go over our weekly agenda, which is a little status report of where we are, what we're working on, what needs the most attention, and other potential issues we may need to discuss for the project going forward. So first thing on our list here is the approaching release of Backdrop 1.0.0, which will be out January 15th. So right now we have 1.0 preview out. We're hoping people are trying it, letting us know what they find, problems they encounter, things they like, things they don't like, and depending on how big changes are based on their feedback, we might even be able to incorporate some of those changes before the 1.0 release. We also have a bunch of minor tasks we're working on between now and release date, and of course the ones that get done before then will probably get in, depending on how solid they are, and the ones that don't will not. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. One thing that we should talk about in this meeting is our potential timeline for what comes after we release 1.0.0. And we've talked about how one of the things that's going to differentiate the way Backdrop works from the way Drupal worked is that we want to have measured and scheduled releases. So that means we need to decide what comes in which release and when that release will happen. And unlike Drupal, we're going to stick to releasing something on that date, even if that something doesn't include the features we originally intended to include. So 1.0.0 will come out, and then we need to decide what is going to be in 1.1.0 and when that will come out, and that'll be our next release. So we need to figure out what our release schedule is going to look like and what will be included in each further release. So we have a couple of things on the agenda here. The first one is a potential 3-month release cycle, and the second one is what I'd like to propose, which is a 4-month release cycle. So this would be either 4 releases per year or 3 releases per year. Originally, I really liked the idea of having 1 release per quarter. That sounded nice and organized to me, but when I started taking a look at the dates those releases would fall on, it seemed like they were pretty close together. And if we're going to be adding significant new features like WYSIWYG and Core, Path Auto, and Token, it seemed like we might need more time between each of those releases in order to get those done. So for those of you who are watching the video and not looking at the agenda, the 3-month release cycle would have the 1.1 release on April 15th, 1.2 on July 15th, 1.3 on October 15th, and 1.4 on January 15th next year. Nate, what is your initial reaction to that? Do those also seem too close together for you?
Well, it's kind of an interesting timeline approach. I think you're right that we wouldn't be able to do things like our 1.1 release, like right now we slated for including, let's see, it was Token, Path Auto, and WYSIWYG.
It's
and
also
doing
on
that,
the agenda too.
Okay, well, doing those 3 in 3 months would be one heck of an accomplishment. So I don't think that aligns with what we've slated for 1.1, but we can think about this and approach this from a different tack. What Symfony does, since Jen and I went to the Symfony conference a couple months ago, we talked with them about how they handle releases. And it's kind of an interesting approach where they follow a policy of not feature-based releases. They don't even plan what features are going to be in each upcoming release. Instead, they just keep working on a feature for potentially, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 2 years until it's finished. And then when they merge it in, they say, okay, now this is going to be in the next minor release. And so they don't actually schedule any of their functionality, but they require all functionality to be absolutely completely finished by the time it's merged. And then they don't, nobody really knows quite what's going to be in the next point release until it's been merged in. And I mean, that's a little bit rough because it makes, it makes predicting what's going to be in which versions a little bit difficult, but it also has
this directly opposed to our principles.
But their policy is that they do timed releases where they literally schedule a release I think it's every 3 months, regardless of what functionality they've done or what they've
So if there's
accomplished.
nothing in it, they still release a new tag.
Yep, yep. Or if there's like 20 features in it all at once, just because all of the work got done all at once, then that's just another minor release. And so it's an interesting approach where they basically forcibly make new minor releases every quarter, I think it is, regardless of what's in there or what is not in there.
So what I would like us to do is to stick to our principles in terms of actually planning what's going to be in a release rather than just saying whatever gets done gets done. But I would like to stick to the Symfony model of issuing a release on the date, regardless of what gets in it. So that way, like we can say, 1.1, we'll plan on having WYSIWYG, Token, and Path Auto, but if 1.1 comes around and all we have is a rich text editor and core, we still ship.
Yeah.
And then that way we're sticking to our idea of like we release whenever we say, but we have a focus. Whereas the problem with Drupal is that they never had a focus, and they always just said, oh, we'll just release with whatever's in it. And then there was nobody had any idea what was coming. And I think that that's what we're trying to avoid by having planned and measured releases, is that people do know what's coming, and that'll give a place. I want to work on something. Okay, well, what's in the next release? We're working on a rich text editor. Okay, and that'll encourage work to happen in that certain area.
So, okay, so if we handle this like we did our initial release, and I'm not sure if this is a good idea, then what we would do is we would schedule the release, we would say what was going to be in the release, and then we would target for that, but we would allow it to adjust. Because what happened, I mean, as you know, our date slipped twice for the 1.0.0 release. And that probably will get worse as we get more.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. That's what happened to Drupal. We need to stop doing that as soon as possible. Because that's how you end up in a 5-year release cycle.
Yeah. Well, we don't actually know what the 2.0
like if we say we're releasing on January 15th, we're going to release on January 15th, and if that doesn't include whatever it is we're working on, that's fine. It ships anyway. And even if the tag includes nothing, there's still a tag on that date that's the same as, all of the bug fix versions or whatever, and it goes out like that.
Yeah. So it really is pretty much the Symfony approach. I was a little bit too liberal when I said that nobody really knows what's going to be in it, because they have focus as well on, particular issues or particular things, and they just strive to get those things done.
Yeah, the reason I think it's important that we use a date and stick to it is because that's what the business world wants to know, is like, I need to allocate money for my website for next quarter. Am I going to have to update it or not? And the business world around Drupal has been struggling with this for a long time. We're like, do I try and request extra funds to upgrade the website or not? And it's always kind of a gamble, like, oh, well, we don't know if there's going to be an update next month or not. It might be next year. It might be 5 years from now. And I think that if we can start to build an ecosystem that the companies that run the software that the business world needs to adjust to in a way that's more predictable, that'll be better for Backdrop, where we can say, we're going to have a release 3 times a year. You can budget to update it 3 times a year, or once a year, or whatever it is you want, and you know that there's going to be a release on this date. Either way, you can bring all of your code up to date. Even if there are less changes, that means less work, but at least it's out, and we can talk about what's going to be in it ahead of time. People will plan for it. If it's not in it, we can say why. Like, we weren't able to solve this problem on IE8 for CK Editor, whatever it is, and then it'll just get pushed into the next release.
And from a marketing perspective, not just reactive in terms of maintenance costs, but looking forward into project planning things, having a published roadmap with on this particular date, we're hoping to have this set of features. And then, if I'm putting together a development team, hell, if I'm raising money for a development team, we can kind of look at that and be like, okay, this will either be in there or be close to being, we could go to dev version, or, know what things to develop internally. If you don't see in the roadmap, okay, well, we're going to have to write that thing ourselves. Like just having that kind of predictability, I think, can help the future path, because you can set all the other pieces in motion, knowing what the technology is likely, hopefully, trying to do.
That's a good point too. Like if we have a bunch of people who are like, I really want Path Auto or whatever it is, and we can say, help us put it in core rather than go add an add-on feature for whatever in contrib. That also might be a good way to get people working on core.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually kind of fine with either of these like quarterly or 3 times a year, because it really just depends on, I mean, it'll just adjust the size of what it gets included. Like, I don't think that we could do Path Auto Token and WYSIWYG by April 15th, for example. We might,
right.
But it would probably end up just being Path Auto and Token, and then WYSIWYG would just have to wait till July. But, I mean, right now, WYSIWYG is going to have to wait until May anyway, so...
Okay.
And, I mean, the dates could be adjusted, but just the way the 4 versus 3, the quarter versus trimester thing works out here, the every 4-month schedule has summer like nicely as one big thing, whereas the quarterly thing, we're splitting summer in half, and I don't know whether that matters, whether people would work on Backdrop for the summer. Just having it switch in mid-July, I don't know if that matters or not, but that just jumped out at me.
Yeah, actually, what I'm really feeling is that given, I mean, it takes a lot of resources to do a release. Like, we have to write out, release notes, and we have to coordinate with people and all kinds of things. I'm feeling that maybe just fewer releases, just from reducing the overhead perspective for the time being, would be a wiser move for us, because it really does take a lot of effort to make a release. It's not just cutting the tag and then going to bed. So I think let's start with fewer, and then we can decide to accelerate it later, just because it'll make it less work for us. And given our limited resources, I think that would be a good move for us.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So why don't I put on here, we have a 4-month release schedule through 2015, and we can reevaluate January 15th, 2016, whether we were happy with that release schedule or not. And then that way it'll give us 3 things to work on. And see how it goes. Less work initially, and if we have like more committers, more people who are able to do things like, take some of the work off your plate for reviewing pull requests and stuff by next year, it might be a good thing to say, okay, well, we want to move faster. Maybe we have a whole bunch of stuff for our roadmap that are smaller projects, as we're moving smaller and smaller modules into core rather than giant ones like rich text editing. It might make more sense to make those things closer together too.
Yeah, agreed. After we have more release managers, that would definitely alleviate that problem. Okay, sounds great.
Great. Yay. Okay. So we have a timeline established. That means that the Backdrop 1.1 release will be on May 15th, the Backdrop 1.2 release will be on September 15th, and the Backdrop 1.3 release will be on January 15th. And we have internally been doing a little bit of mumbling about maybe releasing Backdrop 2 rather soon, so in 1 year or 2 years rather than 3 years or 4 years. So I think it would be good to reevaluate next fall whether we want to do a 1.3 release or a 2.0 release on January next year, just depending on the amount of feedback we've gotten, if we need to change any APIs, just taking a look at how far we've come and what the community thinks of the product. It would be good to kind of reevaluate. If everyone's happy with the status quo, we want to continue, we can then, instead of looking at a major release, look at adjusting our schedule for minor releases too. So I think it'll be good to just kind of work through the first year and see where we're at, and we can reevaluate everything next year. All right, so now that we have a timeline set up, let's talk about our progress. So we've got a couple of things that we're working on between now and the release. I think most important thing at this point would be to decide how we want to solve the security, the one remaining security release that we have that was solved in Drupal 7 that has not yet been solved in Backdrop. And that was the problem that happened about halfway through the Drupal 7 release cycle with image styles being generated in a way that you can take down a server. And the solution that went into 777 broke a whole bunch of contrib that was dealing with image styles that were inline or otherwise created on servers. And so we wanted to look at that solution and say, is there a solution we can implement that isn't going to affect contrib in the same way? And does it mitigate the risk in the same way that the solution that was implemented in 777 does? And I think it's been to a point now where most of contrib has found some way to work around this problem. Sometimes they'll tell people, oh, well, just don't use the security fix set a variable in your settings.php file, which doesn't really help. So I think if we can come up with a solution that is better than turning off the security solution in 777, I think that's a win. If we can solve all the problems that were solved in 777, I think that's a bigger win, but that is a harder problem to solve. Another thing to consider here is how big the actual risk was that they assessed and solved in 777. I have a feeling it's not a super huge risk, and so if we can solve it in a way that is better than nothing but less than what's been done in 777, that might also be satisfactory. So I think we should maybe take another look at that issue. This issue is, does it have its own issue?
Yeah, it does. It's 34.
Yeah, issue number 34. It's a nice early one for us. And take a look at the comments and the different approaches that were recommended in there and see if we can come to a decision about which solution that we want to use for Backdrop. Other things we are working on are there's one remaining issue of 777 cross ports. This is issue 420. I was working on that this morning. This is where you just take all of the other improvements that are included in 777, bug fixes and similar user experience improvements and documentation updates, and merge those in with Backdrop just so we're not behind where 777 is when Backdrop is released. I'll try and get that done today. And then we have, that's it in terms of keeping up with Drupal. We're pretty close, which is good. And then we have a couple of things that we have been working on for our major tasks. The three major features that we have that are differentiating us from 777 right now are blocks and layouts, which is our kind of panels everywhere equivalent, views and core, and config management. We've got a couple of things we're working on in improving blocks and layouts. We've got Boyan working on a new user interface for us, and once we get those design files, we'll be able to do a little revamp of the interface we have now. We've got CSS and markup changes going in, thanks to a front-end review that we got, which made a whole bunch of sense, and it's going to require a bunch of changes to our layouts, but I think the front-enders are really going to like it after that. And I don't know, Nate, you've been doing a lot of work on this. Do you want to give us an update on CSS or markup stuff for layouts?
Yeah, that's been a really interesting issue. We had Trish go through and do an amazing review of all of the markup. And previously, what we'd done is we'd taken the Drupal 7 markup and just kind of converted it into layouts, mostly from the Bartik theme, and then that kind of set the pattern for all of the other layouts. So we've got 3 layouts in core: the 1 column, the 2 column, and then the 3, 3, 4 column, which is the kind of legacy Bartik layout that we're providing for compatibility. And we took that 3, 3, 4 layout markup and just reapplied it to the other ones. And that is things like, we've got it is HTML5, so we've got like the main wrapper, but it had the ID of content, for example, and the header had an ID of header, and the footer had an ID of footer, and we had IDs throughout all of our markup to specify a region. Basically, all regions had IDs, and then inside of them we had a div that had a class of section, and that was just kind of the way regions worked, kind of in Drupal 7. I mean, we got some Drupal 8 updates in there as well. But we had, each region had an ID, and inside of it had a wrapper, and then the actual region content inside of it. And after a really good discussion in there, we came to a lot of conclusions. Things like the inner and outer wrappers for regions is entirely unnecessary these days from a layout perspective. Previously, it was needed because for IE or old browser reasons, you couldn't put padding on the outer wrapper itself, but now you can just use content box, and that's supported in IE 8 and up, so that's all that we're concerned about. So we can eliminate the inner and outer wrappers. the use of IDs has become really discouraged in the front-end world because it causes selector wars, like specificity wars, wherever you use an ID in your CSS, overriding that you have to also specify the ID as opposed to just specifying another class. And so we eliminated all of the classes, so we eliminated all of the IDs and instead settled on prefixing classes with L for layout if they are a layout-specific class. And that has some other great benefits that it makes distinguishing between a layout-based selector and a theme-provided or a component-based selector a lot easier. So if it starts with L, that means that that is something provided by the layout. And if you switch layouts, you may or may not actually have that selector available to you based on the regions that are there. Like you're not going to have a L-triptych, for example, in the 2-column layout, but you know that that's provided by the layout because it's prefixed with L. So lots of great things. Reduction of classes, reduction of wrappers, identification of layout-based classes. But the downside is that we need to update our markup. There's a pull request for that, but the tests aren't passing yet. We'll probably see that in the next couple of days, some revised markup for our layouts.
Yay. Also, a personal exciting bit for me is when you first install Backdrop, if it's using the Bartik theme, which it is out of the box, the footer is like halfway through the page, which is really frustrating because you don't have any content to push it down. And in the layout changes that Nate's doing, he found a way to stick the footer on the bottom of the page, which means that you're gonna, when you install Backdrop, it'll look much better. Just your first impression isn't like, why is there a blue stripe at the top and a gray stripe in the middle and all of this extra white space at the bottom. So I think that's going to really help the first impression too, which is going to be great. All right, so we've got views is another thing that we've been working on, and we have a bunch of people working on converting views, so things that are in core now that are not views, into things that are views. Nate, I know, has been doing a bunch of the more complicated conversions, the stuff for our admin listings, because they also require actions being created at the same time. And I think we have some other people who are working on some of the views that people will actually be overriding. So things that are useful, like the front page and the taxonomy term and the recent comments and stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of pull requests in the works. I think a bunch of them are probably still missing updates. Nate, do you want to give us an update on the more complicated stuff, the user listing and content listing that you worked on?
Yeah, I can't remember. It's been 2 weeks since our last meeting. Hang on, let's see. So I can't remember when this actually happened, but we converted the node administration finally to a view. So when you visit admin/content, that's now a view, which is great. And that's our first administrative listing that we've got converted. We also have a pending pull request for converting the user listing. The whole list of all of these conversions is issue 151. If you want to take a look at the views that need to be converted at some point. None of these are considered holdups for our 1.0.0 release. They're all just really nice, really nice to have. We actually could even do these conversions after the fact because, for the most part, there's no real APIs that are associated with them. Although that's not for users and nodes, there actually is some APIs associated, so that's why we're focused on them first. But anyway, the node listing the node administration has been converted with all of the functionality that it had before, plus some new ones. Like there's a search box. That's handy, considering that I think the administrative menu links as find content. I think it says this even in Drupal 7, but there's no search box. Like the only thing you can do is filter by node type, which is just really silly. So the user administration is converted to, it has one test failure that is proving tricky to figure out, but it'll probably get resolved here in the next week. Let's see. Those two are probably the most important ones, which is why they've been getting focus. But BW Panda's also been working on doing a lot of the block conversions. And some of these we could probably kill entirely. The recent content block is is kind of a piece of crap because it's like it's an administrative like table-based listing of recent content, and I think it was created originally because of a dashboard module in Drupal 7. I think that's what it was.
It's been around long before dashboard.
Oh, well, it was intended to be used for administrative purposes, but it doesn't make any sense as a front-end block. So, but we're also looking at removing the who's new and who's online blocks, which can be converted to views. But the theory is that those who's online and who's new blocks are so infrequently used. And of course, we don't have statistics on this because we don't collect that kind of information in Drupal or in Backdrop. But the kinds of sites that would be most likely to use those blocks are forums, but we've removed forum module. So so it's kind of like even on the few sites that needed it previously, the functionality that is associated with it is no longer even in Backdrop. So we're thinking about removing those, which is considered an API change before the 1.0.0 release, so that we don't need to have the maintenance overhead of it.
With those, though, are there?
Well, it's an API change because you're removing something that previously was there, and so
that's just a change.
Well, it is an.
It's not like Contrib's going to break if that block's not there.
Well, people's sites are going to break, and I think that counts as
That's
being an API change. That's just
change.
It's not an API change, it's just change. So instead of developers having stuff broken, the users are going to have stuff broken. I'm not sure that that's acceptable. What we could do after release, though, if we don't get those done, I think we will. I mean, they're already ready, and we just need to merge it. But if we need to do this in the future, I don't think we should have the option of just wholesale removing stuff. We would have to provide an upgrade path to, in an update hook, re-add those blocks as views, which is a valid approach. But then on new installs, those blocks just wouldn't exist anymore. You would have to create them manually through views.
I don't know. I feel like if we're going to go to the problem of putting in a view, you should let anyone use it, whether it's a new install or an upgrade.
Right.
Like,
that's
there's
also
no benefit
true.
to like doing all this work and then saying only the 0.01% or however many percent of people can even have that feature that we spent like 2 days working on. I feel like if we're going to work on it, just let people use it. There's no reason to mark it hidden or anything. In
the short term, we're probably just going to remove these blocks anyway, so it's not something to worry about. But if this were an intro release consideration, we would need to come up with something else. So, but since it's before release, just kill them. You like killing things. Okay. Let's see. That's it for views.
I mean, we don't really care specifically. Correct me if anything is wrong. About what people in Drupal are doing. We're worried about our addressable audience. So we're worried about people that come to Backdrop that want these features. So maybe it's a documentation thing. Maybe we pull stuff out of that and have within the support stuff say, does anybody want this? Like, check this box to vote here. If we could put it back in, but we don't think anybody uses it. And let them, but give them some path to let us know. That's also true. Like, it's really easy to generate this config file for this view. We could just have a documentation page or like a blog post somewhere that's not even Backdrop that's like, if you want this view, here's your config file, and then tell them where to put it. And that would solve the problem for the people that do have it. We don't have to have anything in core. But in terms of our audience, like we are expecting that the majority of our audience, at least for 1.0, are going to be people who are moving from Drupal 7 to Backdrop. And so it would be nice to not break their sites. But if we can not break their sites by, here's what's in core, and here's a file that's a config file that you should throw in your site to get your view back, I think that's also solving their problem, although less graceful than like just upgrade your site and it's there, for sure. Yeah. I think it's useful as sort of a product roadmap, product management side of things to I mean, not just for this, but just in general, to be constantly, taking the pulse of not only your users, but like, your most important audience, your rejectors, the people that evaluate you and decide not to use you, like, finding out why is tough. And this seems like a pretty good sort of example. Like solve this for that case, and like other stuff will also flow in.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like having some way to survey people about what features they want and what features they don't want would be useful. I think the most value we'll get is if we can find some way to put this into the update status module so that we can figure out like what core views are being used, so we don't accidentally remove something in the future that people are using. Would be great, because that doesn't require any active feedback from people. It would just automatically get the statistics on sites that are running Backdrop. Unfortunately, we don't have any sites running Backdrop right now. We don't have a tool that collects this information yet. But I think that having that automatic thing go, plus some kind of manual thing where, like, if people do want to tell us, these are the features I wanted that I didn't find on Backdrop, it would be good to have some way for those people to get us that information. Right now, we don't have that avenue built. We have, people can tweet at us every now and then. We read tweets and respond to them that way. People can contact us in IRC, and those who find our email address can email us. But that's kind of it. It might be good to have some kind of more official way to contact us, like maybe throwing a contact form on the Backdrop site would be a good starting point. Make it a little easier for people to get us information. And then if we want to set up official surveys that actually ask these questions, that would be good too. I'm not sure we're going to have time to do that between now and 1.0, but having some kind of avenue like that, or at least a policy for an avenue like that, would be good.
It's a hard problem that most of the world gets wrong, so it's not like we're going to magically solve it, but it's good to just have it, in mind and as a desirable thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on there. Views are looking really good. That's the bottom line there.
Okay, so configuration management, we have no current release blockers. I mentioned earlier I was really excited that no one was reporting any problems. It could be that nobody's just testing it because it just kind of works the way they think Drupal works, and so they don't know that there's a config system there that needs additional testing. So if anyone's watching this video and wants to give Backdrop Preview a try, give it a try and then play with config management and see if you can export and import things, and if it diffs the way you want, and if it generally solves the problem that features was being used to solve in Drupal 7. See if you can make any bugs appear. We haven't found any recently. It's got some good testing in there. We haven't gotten any feedback at all about anything being wrong, which makes me feel a little nervous. I mean, maybe everything's working right, but you never know. So that would be a great thing that we could get some feedback on. We've got a list of major bugs, and it looks like, Nate, you want to give us an update on caching, since that was the bane of your existence for a few days.
Yeah. So I put this into the to-do items for 1.0.0 just because if we do have any bugs, that it is possible that we would get a bug that is so bad that we would have to fix it immediately. And one of them came up the other week that the page cache basically wasn't working. And that would qualify as so bad we couldn't possibly do this release. But we fixed that, yay! Because the page cache had been doing this funny thing where it would clear all the time when cron was run, or it would never clear it at all unless cron was run. So that was kind of a big problem. Now you set the page cache lifetime to 5 minutes, and it actually lasts for 5 minutes. There's some really, really, really strange behavior in the way that Drupal 7 handles the page cache. And now, since we removed that minimum cache lifetime option, that's what caused the problem. We didn't realize that clearing the page cache was dependent upon the minimum cache lifetime. But anyway, that's all been fixed now. In the future, if we have any more major bugs that are going to hold up release, we can put them here. But we've been hitting the 1.0.0 tag really heavily, and the ones that are bugs have been getting some priority. And for the most part, I think we might have 2 bugs that are in the 1.0.0 tag, but neither of them are actually critical. So we're looking really good from from like the bug standpoint. We can move on with that.
Yay.
Move on with what we've got. The next section, I'll just go ahead and roll right into it since I added it into the agenda too, and that's tasks for improving backwards compatibility. Now that we are so close to release and we've got a whole bunch of people looking at things, and we've got some time, basically, we're trying to figure out how we can improve the backwards compatibility further with Drupal 7. And two of the most obnoxious changes that we inherited from the early Drupal 8 cycle is some API changes that were purely for cleanup purposes, but really are providing there's no actual reason for removing them. Include in Drupal 8, they removed cache set and cache get, the procedural functions. And in Backdrop, what we've currently been doing is you just create a new cache object by using the cache function, and then that returns an object, and then you say cache arrow set and cache arrow get. And even in Drupal 7, there was an internal cache object, but you couldn't get at it. In Backdrop, you can now access the cache object directly, and so they removed the procedural wrappers. Well, we are all about maintaining compatibility, so instead of removing removing the procedural wrappers, you can now access the cache object directly and use the object-oriented approach, or you can use the procedural method of cache underscore set or cache underscore get. So anyway, that's one huge API compatibility improvement, because that was something that I was running into frequently in my porting tasks. The second one that we did in the past week was we restored the name of the global for language. In Drupal 8, they renamed it from language to language interface, which is purely, they just renamed it to make it be more specific to what it is, because there's actually 3 language globals: language content, language, and language path, I think. And so they renamed language to language interface to make it clear that there was other language globals available. But that means that every place you have to reference that variable, then you had to rename it. I think my find and replace in Drupal core was there were about 700 references to this when I put it back. So that's an idea of how frequently this gets used and how many times you'd have to change it if you were porting from Drupal 7. So things like that are really great enhancements that make it so that moving from Drupal 7 is easier, and we're hoping that we can continue to make it easier yet. Yeah, and Jen just added this issue 530 is another issue that we realized that we accidentally renamed a function. Maybe, I'm not sure if it's accidental or not.
That one.
But if we rename a function that gets commonly used, we should provide a wrapper for it. We've already got the backwards compatibility Drupal.inc file, so we can wrap things if we need to, and mark them deprecated if we're going to remove it later.
Okay. Let's see. So I added, while Nate was talking, I added a section in here for kind of a list of bugs. So after 1.0.0 comes out, we're going to have 2 lists we're paying attention to. One of them is a list of bugs that are in 1.0.0, and those bugs will need to be fixed in minor bug fix versions. And so I've added a list here where we can track bugs that come up in 1.0.0 that need to be fixed. Obviously, that's not out yet, so we don't have that list yet, but we will update this one in the near future. And then we also have a list here of items that are going to be in 1.1. And so, as we mentioned earlier today, currently on this list are rich text editor, token module, and path auto. I think maybe we should readjust our priorities on this. I don't know if we need to think about it now or if we can think about it after 1.0, but maybe we should just remove rich text editor if you want that to be in 1.2.
I need some time to think about that.
Okay, so let's not think about it now. Let's think about 1.0 first, and we can revisit what comes after 1.0. 1.0 once we get 1.0.0 done. But yeah, we have a list here of what's currently on our plate for 1.1, and we can update this in the future as we start to look at that more closely. There's a bunch of other stuff we're working on too that's not currently tied to a specific release. We've got some style guide changes that are going on. We have Darius, our designer, doing a design review of the current style guide now. We'll see what he gets back to us in terms of how much change we will have time to make before 1.0.0 comes out. There might not be very much time because we've down to 15 days now. But we do have a design review happening of that finally, which is good. And we've got some other things going on too. There's obviously a bunch of issues on GitHub around user experience. I've started prefixing all of those issue titles with square bracket UX square bracket. Since we have a limited number of tags we can use, I didn't want to start creating tags for everything because it'll make our tag list impossible to manage. So I created square brackets. We were using meta to indicate meta issues. We now have DX for developer experience and UX for user experience. As we come up with other things that are more tag-like and less label-like, we can continue to create more of those too as we start noticing patterns develop. So things that are ongoing that we'll be able to include at any time are user experience changes. Things that we might need to be more careful about including are developer experience changes, because if any of those require an API change, they'll have to wait. Things like, I think, adding a backwards compatibility wrapper around things. I don't know, Nate, how you feel about if that's an API change or not. But there might be some small things that are not API changes that we could get in minor bug fix releases too. So those are the issues there. If people want a good place to jump in, some of those are novice issues and are good first issues if you want to work on Backdrop, or if you just really care about user experience and want to create us designs for things. There's some issues there that could use some design work too. Okay, so that is Backdrop CMS, the product. And we've got a bunch of other stuff that we're working on for our community as well. One of the things that was a release blocker that was not actually Backdrop CMS, the product, last week was trying to get an update server doing something so that our core Backdrop does not throw errors when it tries to check with an update server to find out if it's up to date. And Nate, you've done a bunch of work on that. Do you want to let us know what the end solution ended up being?
Yeah, it's not a solution. It's a temporary shim. But what we've done is, well, long term, what we need to do is we need to make it so the update module receives update information like it does in 777 and says when a module or core itself needs to be updated. But the trouble with that is that we don't have the infrastructure yet in place to report when a new version of a module comes out, because we don't even have a repository of all modules and their versions yet. So we've got a lot of infrastructure set up to be done to make it so that that's even possible to have update module return information. So what we've done for the time being is we've taken the update server where it will ultimately live, which I think is like updates.backdropcms.org. And we've just set up the entire domain to return the HTTP response 501 not implemented. So there's an HTTP response that just says what you're trying to do isn't implemented yet, which is perfect because that's exactly what the situation is. It will work in the future, but it doesn't work right now. And then we made some changes to update module to recognize when a 501 HTTP response is returned. It doesn't report an error. It just reports a notice saying that no updates, or that the update server does not currently work yet. And then it links to the related GitHub issue to say, you know, when the update server will actually be done, or show progress on how the update server is coming along. So that makes it so that when you leave update module on, in theory, what will happen is it will not give you nasty, errors all over your site, and instead it will just give you a notice saying that, the updates basically don't work yet. But as soon as the update server is put in place, all of the sites that we have out there will immediately start reporting themselves as, this is the version of the software they're running, and we can keep an aggregate basically from day one of all of the Backdrop 1.0.0 sites that are out there.
I think that's great. it's a perfect temporary solution, and it will give us enough time to figure out what our long-term solution will be. So that's good. Okay, so other things we're working on include the Backdrop API site, and I think we're pretty good. So the API site is currently set to pull the latest version of the Backdrop code and show all of the functions. So if you want to search functions for Backdrop, you can definitely do that. We also have a growing change record section, and at last examine, I think all of the issues from GitHub that were tagged needs change record have a change record. And I know that we've got a couple of people working on reviewing the issues that are there and making sure that they have good code examples and all that stuff. So I think we're getting pretty close. We also have someone reviewing all of the issues from early Drupal 8 and their change records, which the change records on Drupal org are likely to be different than what we need on Backdrop, but they're still a great starting point. And I think we're pretty close on those as well. So every time I go check our list of change notices on the API site, I am thoroughly impressed because I've done zero work on it, and there's so much good work that's happening over there. So thank you, Luke, and thank you everyone who's done any work on the change records, because they're coming along really well. So I think Nate, maybe you and I can look over those after 1.0.0 comes out and see if there's anything that wasn't tagged that we missed. I know that there's going to be some theme stuff that we've changed around that I'm not sure got tagged with needs change notice, so I'll go through that and see if we can get that cleaned up too. So yeah, okay, great progress on that. I'm really excited about it. Other stuff that we also need to think about working on is all of our Magic GitHub integration. So there's a couple of different pieces associated that. The first one's one we've been talking about every week, creating a GitHub service so that anyone who creates a module, theme, or layout for Backdrop will be able to register it as such on GitHub. And that will allow our site to set up the central repository of all of the modules, themes, and layouts that exist for Backdrop, their statuses, so that our update status module work, and also give people a nice, convenient way to search for modules, themes, and layouts for Backdrop from our website. So a single place to go to find everything is also going to be really handy. And then there's some other integration we need with GitHub too. In particular, we want to make things happen more automatically on the GitHub side. So things about issue management, so that when pull requests are filed, related issues get the tags applied correctly. So whether that pull request needs a review or is RTBC, the issue should get a matching tag. As soon as a pull request exists, the issue should get a tag needs pull request. When an issue is closed, any pull requests associated with that issue should also be closed. Just a bunch of kind of cleanup tasks that we need to do to make managing our issue queue easier in the long term. And then also, if we have someone playing with GitHub magic behind the scenes, it would be great if we could get our projects, like the tags associated in correct places, and things synchronized. I know right now we have a project for Backdrop, and then we have a project for Backdrop on Pantheon, which is almost exactly the same thing right now, but it will eventually end up containing a bunch of Pantheon-specific code that I don't think we want to have to worry about. But every time that Backdrop gets a tag, that tag should be pushed into the Pantheon repository so that people who click the Try a Demo button on our website and get sent over to Pantheon will get to demo the latest tag. And this is something that we've set up, and it hasn't ever quite been working. I think it'll work any minute now because I made the last updates to the Pantheon Backdrop repository that include the changes that were necessary in Backdrop to make that work. But I want to make that process automatic so that we don't have to remember to update two repositories every time we make an update to the master. So if we have someone figuring out how to do all of this magic GitHub stuff in the background, that would be a feature request that I have as well. And we do have a list of all of the tasks that should happen between the issue queue and the pull request queue, as well as things we would like to have happen behind the scenes. And I think those are all in the Backdrop Ops group on backdropcms.org's issue queue, as opposed to Backdrop issues issue queue. But yeah, I think I pinged Jared last week to see if he, or 2 weeks ago or so, to see if he would be interested in working on that. I've gotten no response. So I would assume Holidays are happening. I'm not expecting a fast response from anyone, but I would also assume that he's not chomping at the bit to do that. So if we have anyone else who wants to work on GitHub internal stuff, which I personally think would be really fun, and I kind of want to learn, but I have other stuff that I already know, and so I keep working on that instead. If anyone else has time and interest in working on it, we could definitely use some help on that GitHub front there too. Okay, other things we're working on are the flagship backdropcms.org website. We have gotten designs for a new version of our site that includes a logo. We've got half of the designs implemented today on the Backdrop site. We have our new fonts. We put a logo on the site. We don't have the Backdrop word mark on the site yet. I still need to add that. And we've started implementing some of the new responsive design stuff too. Everything except for a nice solution to a menu, which we don't have on there yet. So we're like halfway through, but it's slightly better than it was last time we had this meeting. So progress, not completion, but we're getting there. And then we also, in the future, we'll add a whole bunch of stuff to our primary site as well, including browse pages for finding modules, themes, and layouts, a showcase for sites built with Backdrop, a service provider directory if you're trying to look for a developer or a designer who can work on your Backdrop site, and then a jobs section for people who are trying to hire people who work on Backdrop. So, of course, all of these things. Oh, I have a cat falling on me. Sorry, everyone. Oh. Never dull moment here at Backdrop HQ. Cat falling out of the inbox onto keyboard. Anyway, yeah, so we've got all the good stuff going on for the primary website that is coming down the pipeline, but we're not actually implementing it currently. In terms of our communication, this meeting is held every Thursday. Video, you can watch it now, you can watch it later, you can join in if you are on Hangouts. We also hang out in IRC every Thursday after this meeting. We are usually working in IRC on Backdrop, so if you use IRC, you can ask us questions directly. We're on Twitter all the time at Backdrop CMS. If you have any questions about us or want to share anything with us, or just tweet about us in general, we're watching that and are really appreciative to all of the communications we've gotten there. And thanks to a wonderful suggestion from Luke today, I'll try and set up a contact form on our website. So if anyone needs to get a hold of us, we can try that for a while. I think right now that makes sense because we have enough bandwidth to deal the amount of email that we'll get through that form. Longer term, I think that might not be a great solution because we're going to end up getting a lot more emails than there are people with time to answer them. But short term, I think that's perfectly fine. So we'll come up with a longer term avenue for communication between our users and us that might make a little bit more sense. But for now, I think that's probably about as good as we can do. And then, yeah, generally, I don't think we have anything on our horizon here in terms of publicity. We should probably plan on making a bunch of noise around January 15th to let everybody know that Backdrop is out. I don't have any specific plans for how we're going to do that. I am planning on writing another article for the Backdrop magazine that will be out in March. So hopefully we'll have a better idea of what the landscape looks like by then, which will be good. March? Was it May? I don't remember. Sometime this year. I know my article's due in February, but I'm not sure when the magazine actually comes out. I think it's considerably later than that. But yeah, we should try and plan some stuff. I think maybe Doug Van is collecting some media outlets where we would be able to let them know that Backdrop is out. That might be something to schedule around January 15th. And tell everyone you know. If you're watching this, podcasts would be good. We can probably try and schedule some of those and just get people trying it and seeing what they think. Let's see. Anything else that we should talk about today or that we should add to this agenda for talking about every week?
Nope. Apologies, everybody that wanted a short meeting. Since we missed last week, it was twice as long.
All right. Well, that's all I had. I think we should break. We'll be on IRC if anyone wants to add anything or ask us anything or any of that good stuff.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for watching, and thanks for joining in.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye, guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.